Okay, so in Google Classroom, I have this on the page. You want to go under week 4, and there's 2 things I posted today, but you want to open the one that is the Intro to Organic Molecules Nearpod, please. Friday Zoom. We're picking up a little bit of that. We were talking about chemistry just a wee bit when we were doing levels of organization. So we're talking about carbon in particular now and organic molecules. So this would have been a good prompt. What do you think of when you think of organic? And I think usually from the years that I've been doing this, usually people say like grown, homegrown, or grown without pesticides or something like that. But categorically, like in the chemistry world, when we say organic, we specifically mean that it's molecules made of carbon, and even more specifically than that, they have carbon-carbon bonds or carbon-hydrogen bonds. I just can't keep you guys where I want you. You keep jumping to the top and I want you on my side. So I'm going to quit trying. Okay, so there's 4 macromolecules we're going to spend. You've already been investigating them, so this should hopefully sound very familiar and kind of review-ish. But we need to be really familiar with carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. And these are topics we'll talk about all year. So carbohydrates, like when we get into photosynthesis and cellular respiration, those are 2 really big units we hit November, December. We're going to have to be really well informed about the structure of a carbohydrate. Second semester, we get into DNA and its job. So we're going to need to know its structure, and the more we know now, the easier it'll be to build on it later. Nucleic acids, they code for proteins, and so then we're going to be talking about protein synthesis second semester. So the more we know now, it's going to help us out. Lipids, we're mostly going to talk about those when we talk about the cell membrane, which is our next unit. Okay, so we're going to go on, and we're kind of back and forth between content and questions. So carbon is basically the backbone of biology, meaning all living things are made of carbon. The molecules that make us up, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids, are all carbon-based, meaning they have a carbon. We refer to the carbon backbone, meaning every other element is attached to it. So here you can see this is an amino acid, which makes up proteins. You have carbon, and then everything else is attached to it. So it's the central atom. Here, these are long chains of carbon, and in solution, they'll wrap around and form rings, and that's why it looks that way. Down here, these are considered inorganic because they don't have carbon. NaCl, salt. H2O, water. There's no carbon in either of those, so they're not organic. So it's important to know just how important carbon is for us. It's the 6th most abundant element in the universe. So remember, we learned there's like 94 different elements found in the universe. So it's the 6th most abundant. Things like diamond, coal, that's just straight up carbon. Graphite that is in your pencils, fuels like fossil fuels, and the air we breathe contains carbon, CO2. The air we breathe out is CO2, that contains carbon. So we're going to cycle carbon between the living things and also between the non-living things. So we're all based on that one atom. The ability of carbon to form covalent bonds. So last week you were introduced to covalent bonds, but just barely. So there's 2 different kinds of bonds. Ionic, where electrons are like forfeited basically. I will give Theo my electrons, and Theo will be satisfied, and I will be satisfied because I had too many. Sharing, so I take my cookie and I break it apart and I give Theo some of it. We're going to share that cookie, and then we're both satisfied. So covalent bonds are that sharing of the electrons. So this carbon is sharing its electrons with hydrogen, and it's also sharing electrons with oxygen. So that electron is really busy. So anyways, all our organic molecules are made with covalent bonds. And you can see here, we make long chains. We can also make rings. This is usually in solution. And then also we can make branches. And I don't have a picture of a branching, but that accounts for like 80% of all our known compounds. This is our carbon atom. You might remember you drew a picture of this on one of your worksheets. Notice the outer ring. So this outer ring has 4 electrons. It wants 8 to be happy. That means it needs 4 more, so it's going to share 4. So that means it can make 4 bonds with other elements. It can make double bonds. It can make triple bonds, as long as it adds up to 4. Okay, so we have individual units called monomers. This one right here, this would be a monomer. If we add them together, and we'll talk about the reaction that makes those another day. If we add them together, we get what's called a polymer. So mono, 1, mer, unit. 1 unit, poly, many, many units. Okay, so polymers are molecules made of many repeating units. So you can see this glucose molecule is repeated over and over again. And so those monomers are linked together by covalent bonds. Each of the macromolecules we talk about, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids, those are going to be the polymer. Then we want to know what their individual units are, what monomer makes each of them up. So looking forward, that's something knowledge we're going to accumulate, okay? Was a central carbon atom. I realize now I should have a slide that has this answer on it. So you have the central carbon, and you have 4 hydrogens bound to it. Let me see me. Okay, so it should look like that. And this is important because as we make different molecules, we're going to change the hydrogen and we're going to make something else. But overall, that's the basic structure of all our organic molecules, okay? So 99% of our bodies are made up of 6 elements. And this is going to be a test question. So mark it, write yourself a note. Thank you. CHO, N, P, and S. Cho, cho, chan, chops. That is, okay, so maybe even 2 minutes. I hear a lot of people say it wasn't. Okay, so we make carbohydrates and lipids with these 3 letters. Oh, these 3 letters, these are out of order. And then we add nitrogen to make protein and nucleic acids. We add sulfur for proteins, phosphorus for nucleic acids. So knowing that our body are made up of those 4 macromolecules, it makes sense that those 6 elements are the majority of our body. So we also have some calcium, and we also have, I guess that's all of the ones listed. Calcium is like in your bones, right? So that's important. So these are the 4 macromolecules we're talking about, and I'll tell you for each of them, we want to know what elements make them up. We're not going to talk about all of them today. Today we're just going to do carbohydrates. We want to know their monomers, their individual units, and we want to be able to recognize them from a structure, okay? We want to know their function. So there's basically 4 things we want to know of each. So carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids. Today's topic is carbohydrates. So a carbohydrate has a basic ratio of 1 to 2 to 1. So what that's saying is for every carbon, there's 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen, which is how it got its name, right? So when I look at this, I see a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. That subscript says I have 2 hydrogens. Then it's basically carbon and water, right? So literally translated, carbohydrate, carbon and water. So the individual unit, remember we said we want to know their monomers. The individual unit is a monosaccharide, a single sugar. That's what it means. So our most common example is glucose, and we're very familiar with glucose because it's our blood sugar, right? One of your test questions was about insulin regulating the blood sugar level. It was a negative feedback, part of the endocrine system that deals with hormones. So they all have the basic structure here. See, they have 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens, but they might be arranged differently. So we can see here, this group is in a different position. This hydrogen may be on a different, this OH is in a different place. So the OH is called hydroxide, just to make it easier to talk about. The double bond O is called carbonyl. just making it easier to talk about, I can say what's different is the position of the carbonyl and the position of the hydroxyl on the fourth carbon, okay? So single sugars, these are what they look like when you put them in solution. So I would recognize these in a picture because almost all of your hexagons or pentagons or hexagons will be sugars. So this is now disaccharides. Di means two, so it's literally 2 sugars. So we're gonna double the amounts, 12, 22, 11. I still have a 2-to-1 ratio because you're gonna be identifying these by structures. I still have a 2-to-1 ratio hydrogen to oxygen, right? 22 to 11. And this is what they would look like. So here's 2 glucose molecules bound together. Here's a glucose and a fructose. Fructose is found in fruit. It's also a simple sugar. Here's a glucose bound with a galactose, which makes lactose. Some of you may be lactose intolerant, so that sugar is found in milk. All right, so 2 simple sugars put together to make a double sugar is a disaccharide. Then we have a polysaccharide. Poly is many, sugars, many sugars. We usually call them complex carbs. And we're most familiar with our starches because it's a big part of our diet if we're eating potato or noodles, pasta. But another important polysaccharide is cellulose. Cellulose is found in the cell walls of plants. So that's probably the most abundant molecule on Earth because it's in all of the plants that make up our universe. Couple other important ones, glycogen. Glycogen is what our body uses for energy, stored energy. It's in our muscles and our liver. So again, back to that last chapter, we talked about insulin regulating blood sugar because it's going to break down the glycogen to release individual sugar molecules. Chitin is another example. Chitin is found in the cell walls of fungi, mushrooms, and also in the exoskeletons of our arthropods. Okay, so this is what we were looking for. So monosaccharides, a single circle. Disaccharides, a double circle. Polysaccharides, a triple circle. So I tried to put it on the right or left. Fructose, example of a monosaccharide. Fruit. We take fruit for quick energy. The simpler that sugar is, the quicker we can get the energy out of it. Sucrose, that's table sugar. So what, the white granules, that's table sugar. It's a disaccharide, and then starch is our polysaccharide. So that was a challenging one. So we use carbohydrates mostly for energy. It serves a lot of purposes. It's a member of our cell membranes, but for us, let's just consider it energy. Glucose, sucrose, fructose. Every gram contains 4 calories of energy. So calorie is a unit of energy. It's a measurement. So 1 gram of water raised 1 degree Celsius requires 1 calorie. So when you're reading your food labels and it says it has 12 grams of sugars, you can go 12 times 4. That's 48 calories that you're getting from the carbs. So energy storage, the more complex, the more it's going to store. So starch and glycogen, starch for plants, glycogen for us. Cellulose is in the cell walls of plants. These blue tubes, that's cellulose. So you can see how it's between the inner and outer layer of the cell wall. Okay. So that is what I have for your carbohydrates. Do you currently have any questions over carbohydrates or carbon? So we're going to go into, yesterday you did the CK12 for proteins and lipids. Tons of people turned that in, so that's awesome. And then we want to add nucleic acids. I forgot that that one was added. And today I gave you an inquiry worksheet. So I want the nucleic acids. Let's get that done right away. And then if you need the weekend to complete the inquiry worksheet, it's a little bit long, okay? So you can have the weekend to complete that. But today, let's make sure we get through the nucleic acids because we do have time for that. After the nearpod, mark your assignment as done. Mark it done, mark it done, mark it done. You've all done it just now with me. Yeah, so Wednesdays, that's the only time I see you, right? So I have to have attendance in by 3:30 on every day. And so today, like if I saw you now, so I'm marking you present. And if your assignment comes in later, that's not as big a deal. But on Wednesday, attendance, that's the only time I see you. So by 3:30, it's marked or it's not marked. So I went through and I did the rest of them this morning at about 5:30. So check Skyward now. Your grade should be in there. So it takes me a couple days because yesterday, like I have AP biology and 2 anatomies and I'm taking care of them all day on Thursdays. So then I don't come back to you until Friday.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was just wondering.
So like keep that in mind for any of them. If it's after 3:30 and you turned it in, you might not see it that day. You might have to wait till our next meeting day. Okay. And then I always circle back and come back to those things. Okay, so you're gonna do nucleic acids today. Maybe start your macromolecules. It's a little bit longer, but you can have the weekend for that one. Other than that, if you want to investigate the test, you can stick around. But if you're all set, you can take off. Those of you who are going to try to investigate, and you can even do this on your own, hopefully, you should be able to go to For Students. So go to your school, hazlet.k12.mi.us. Then click on For Students. And this is where, because I'm not a student, I don't have the same access. So I'm hoping you see what I want you to see. Then you're going to go to Student Portal, Illuminate Education Student Portal. Your username will be your hazlet.k12.mi.us, and then it's your main login. So I think that's the one that you use to like turn on computers and launch everything. Like you should have a record of your tests. So it should have your assessment here. Under assessments, click assessments, and you should see our assessment. And then when you open it, can you see the questions that you got wrong? And can you see the test to look at it to know what the questions were? Excellent.